Hi everybody, I'm Tony E at Show IP Interface Brief, and today is day 26 of my 100 Days of Labbing journey. And today's been kind of a chill day. I have been hitting the labs pretty hard over the past couple of days, and today I kind of dialed it back and went back to some study and some review. So actually, what I wanted to do was, I'm calling tonight's episode, which is something that I mentioned in Discord earlier, Everything You Need to Know About OSPF. And while that's a bold statement, it kind of goes back to what I've been saying all along, which is about mastering the foundations. And if you can master the foundations of OSPF, then I feel like anything built on top of that just comes, it's like icing on the cake. So OSPF is a pretty hard subject to master. It's a hard subject to master because there are so many facets. There are so many new terms. There are so many things you have to remember, different timers, different area types, different LSA types, different interactions, different stub areas, totally stubby, not so stubby, totally not so stubby. It's the language that was involved in developing OSPF is absolutely madness, in my opinion. If we could go back and redevelop OSPF from the ground up, I'd like to give things some logical names instead of this absolute craziness that we have. But we do have this craziness, and so we have to manage it. And that means that being a CCIE candidate and someone who's working towards their CCIE needs to be able to know a lot of these things. And I'm not talking about just going through and memorizing a list of facts. Okay, that would be the wrong approach. Actually, what I'm talking about is actually going through and figuring out the underlying theory, the technology behind it, and actually labbing each of those components up and knowing what the difference is. And what I mean is the past few days, even a little bit last week, I've been focusing pretty hard on OSPF. And that's led me to go down this journey that I've been fearing for a long time, which is exploring the OSPF database. I won't get into that, but that has been a fun exercise to do over the past few days. And I started thinking to myself, while I was studying for my CCIE written, I actually made, everyone studies for their CCIE or any sort of exam differently. And I guess in this regard, I'm sort of an old school guy because I went ahead and made flashcards. Lots and lots. Here's another book. So you have these two books of flashcards. This isn't all of them. This is just the chunks that I had sitting on the shelf next to me. And in here are a bunch of cards dedicated to different OSPF network types and the different characteristics of those network types and how it affects things like LSA generation, DR-BDR election, defaults for physical interfaces and logical interfaces, and some important information. And tonight's exercise was a study exercise. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try and recall all of those facts that were in here without looking at it. And so I started doing that, and actually I started putting together a blog post which I've linked in the description below. I've also posted it over in the Discord channel, and I'll probably tweet it out later for maximum exposure. And what I did was just sort of outline everything that I think of as being a foundational fact, I guess you could say, foundational information that is sort of a need to know for OSPF. Now, something that I actually wrote in the blog here, okay, and I think this is very important. If anyone is going to click the link below, open up my blog, it's the link below. This is a really long list of information. In fact, I have it here, so let me bring it up on the screen. This is a long list of information, and this just becomes sort of bits of information that you need to commit to memory and memorize, right? You need to know these things. I feel like it's important to know these things. I feel like these are the things that are confusing to me. This may not be true for everybody. It's true for me. These are the things that confuse me, so I have to make sure I put them on paper and understand them. And I have to make sure that the language that I use to describe some of these elements is language that I understand, not textbook language. Textbook language is sometimes very hard to understand. It needs to be language that I can understand. So one of the very important things that I want to point out is, and I put it right here as the pro tip, don't treat this as a long list of items to memorize, but rather as a checklist of topics to lab up. You should be able to lab up every single one of these. You should be able to stand up 2 routers and configure broadcast, network type broadcast between them, and be able to know where in the configuration are some of these elements, where in the show output are some of these elements, right? And what this means. And then go through and configure another interface for non-broadcast. And what does that mean? And what are the configuration elements that you need to configure that? And the next one, point to point. And what does that mean? So that's what I mean. So this is all of the, what I call like foundation information that I feel like is so important in OSPF. It's something that I have struggled with. Here I am, I've recently passed my CCIE written, and I still struggle with committing some of these things to memory. For one, I don't deal with routing and switching every day like I'd like to in my regular job. And when I do, it's not OSPF, it's typically BGP. And so my exposure to OSPF is really as much as I can do in these labs, as much as I force my exposure onto myself. So these things might come natural to somebody who deals with it all the time. And again, I don't. So, and then trying to sort out all of these different things becomes very difficult. So these are the important things to understand.
Network types. Actually, so when you configure OSPF on an Ethernet interface, it automatically by default takes the broadcast network type. When you configure OSPF on a serial interface, by default, it takes the point-to-point network type. And the other caveat here is when you're configuring OSPF on a tunnel interface, it goes ahead and takes the point-to-point network type. So these other ones are important. And actually, what excuse me, I'm going to step back. The major headings here on the blog are OSPF network types. You should be able to know the network types. The LSA types, you should be able to know the LSA types, area types, and route types. And I think that's where I end up down at the bottom. Okay, so don't treat this as a long list memorized. Instead, treat this, each section, like a lab. Go ahead and lab it up. Lab it up and figure out how to configure it, how to validate without looking at the show running config, using only show commands. And then the bonus here is take a look at the PCAPs. See what the PCAPs look like and start getting familiar with that. Admittedly, I don't know what most of this stuff looks like in a PCAP. I'm very unfamiliar with OSPF in a PCAP. So that's on the to-do list, is something to do, is to really dive at PCAPs. But I want to make sure I put this out here as sort of a curated list of information. And I wanted to put it out there in a language that I understand. So I can use it for reference, but also anyone who's studying for, if you're studying for CCNA, you'll need to know some of this OSPF stuff. If you're studying for CCNP, you will need to know this OSPF stuff. And if you're studying for the CCIE written, it's a good idea to go ahead and know this. And again, at the CCIE level, I don't recommend any sort of memorization. I recommend hands-on labbing. That's how you'll memorize these things. That's how I've done it. So I actually, I have a big whiteboard behind me. I drew all of this up on a whiteboard one day and just started labbing it and crossing stuff off the list so I could expose myself to each one of these details. So that's been my exercise tonight, is to kind of run through some of the theory behind it. In fact, some of these I didn't know off the top of my head. So I actually had to jump into a lab, configure 2 routers, change the network type, and then check the timers on them, and actually make sure that the stuff I was putting in here was accurate. If any of this happens to be incorrect or inaccurate, please, please, please let me know in a comment below in the blog. Don't bother leaving a comment on this YouTube, because I probably won't tie the two together. So that's been pretty important, and I recommend everybody spend some time to get that deep understanding of OSPF. Now, this isn't going to give you the expert level OSPF understanding like, you know, we've mentioned Nick Russo so much in the past couple of days because I've worked in his lab for a couple of days. I think 2 days we did his lab. And in my mind, he's probably going to be the go-to reference for OSPF for quite a while. But if you understand these things, then again, I said this a lot of times in previous vlogs, I want to be able to be presented with a topology and have some random OSPF areas on here and be able to understand these elements that are contained within the blog and how they fit into a topology. That's the goal here, is to become so familiar with it that although it's not muscle memory, it's not at your fingertips, it is muscle memory. You can just sort of see it and recognize it. So this is a step in that direction, because I knew a lot of the stuff while studying for the CCIE written. I drilled it into my head. And since then, I really haven't touched these facts. So I was really surprised to see how much I retained. As well as some things weren't clear. So I went to the text. And again, the land tamer, if he watches this video, he is going to love this. But I'm going to refer back to my favorite book. I'm falling more and more in love with this book from the Cisco Press, an old book, copyright 2000, but chapter 8, Understanding OSPF, Open Shortest Path First. It is written just the way I want to consume the information. It's not very wordy. It's a little bit of bullet points, a little bit of config, and a topology. Next subject. A little bit of config, a couple of bullet points, topology. Next subject. It goes through and explains things by sort of just delivering the facts and not in sort of a narrative or like talking about the history of a protocol. Which is one of my comments on the CCIE, what the book I have here, the call it CCIE Routing Switching V5, Volumes 1 and 2, the official cert guide. I have both of them sitting here on the desk. Peter Pollock, great author, brilliant guy. I sat in his EIGRP session in Cisco Live. It was absolutely amazing, and I had the wonderful opportunity of chatting with him in the hallway with the land tamer one day after session, and it was great, great, great. His EIGRP section in here is really well done, with so deep with information. But he even goes ahead and provides the entire history of EIGRP and how it came from IGRP, and how some of the metric values, although we typically don't use them in EIGRP, are there because they're carried over from legacy to be sort of backwards compatible with IGRP. I actually read that chapter in its entirety, and because I think I was on a plane when I did it. However, for consuming facts and for being mindful of my own time, that history lesson doesn't do me any good when I'm trying to just drink from the fire hose with facts. So this book has been very good. I love it a lot. I've been referencing it a lot on stream. So I recommend everyone go get it on Safari Books. Go find a download. It's a great book. I bought it at Cisco Live. Cisco Press books are really expensive. This is a fat book. This is, you know, a couple inches, probably nearly 3 inches, certainly more than 2.5. And we're talking nearly 900 pages. Really fat book. It was only available in a paperback, not a hardcover. And I don't know how, it was a discount to buy it at Cisco Live, which thank goodness it was, because here on the back cover, $79.99 for this reference material. So not cheap, man. Getting in the CCIE game is not cheap. But this text is done well, and so this text helped me out with filling in some of the things that I couldn't recall off the top of my head for this blog post that I did. Okay, I talked about flashcards, I talked about the blog post, and a couple of questions have been coming up recently about my schedule. So I kind of want to address that, and I think I'm just going to have to take some time. I'm not going to do it tonight, but actually take some time, maybe Sunday, and actually sit down and make a calendar to be able to share with everybody and be able to pre-plan out some of my labs that I'm going to do. Now, I think everyone knows, anyone who's following me knows that Saturday is my live stream, my all-day live stream where I get to do a large, long lab. I started this a couple Saturdays ago, and it is going to be something that I carry on hopefully throughout the entire 100 days. This upcoming Saturday, which is going to be August 4th, I'm going to be doing the INE Foundation Lab 3 from their CCIE V5 workbook, which is available on their website for $299. It's a great resource. I've had the workbook for a long time. I worked through most of the Advanced Technologies labs, but now I'm using the Foundation labs because they're sort of large labs. They're big topologies like this. There's a ton of routers on them, a bunch of switches, and it reads like the similar tasking that you would find in the CCIE lab. And I really like that because, you know, something I've been saying on stream for a long time is these sort of labs and this entire experience is not about showcasing your strengths. It's about uncovering your weaknesses, exposing your weakness. And every time I do one of these large labs, I find a piece of technology or an understanding that I don't have, something I'm missing. And so when someone had asked me today, sort of alluding to what is my schedule, how do I pick my labs, how do I choose what I'm going to study, how do I know, you know, if anyone's following along, how can we follow along together as a group? So the only thing I can say is that on Saturdays, I have these planned labs. I have this Saturday coming up, which is planned. After this Saturday, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might continue on with the INE stuff. The following labs after the Foundation labs are troubleshooting labs. So they're actually large-scale labs like this. That have faults in them, and you have to. I think you have to work through tickets and solve those faults. So that's probably what I'll do on following streams the following Saturdays. So what do I do in between my Saturdays? I try to focus on those technologies that I was unsuccessful on, or that gave me trouble, or that I was confused on my Saturdays. So my Saturdays really dictate my week. As you guys know, previously it was PPPoE. I got a big old fat 0 on my very first lab. I didn't understand how to configure PPPoE at all. It's something I wasn't exposed to. I don't have a lot of practice at. And so I went ahead and drilled that and drilled that and drilled that. And the next lab, when I had to configure PPPoE, I think it was 3 or 4 bullet points. I got 3 of them right off the bat because I had done the drill, because I had done configuration, because I had read up on the theory. But I still missed one of the bullet points. And because I'm a harsh grader, I gave myself a 0. Now I've read up on that. I've exposed myself to that. So hopefully, if I get PPPoE again, I can be ready for any of the challenges that the coming lab is going to give me. I haven't looked at the lab material. Just so you guys know, when I look at it Saturday morning, that's the first time I expose myself to it. I actually don't look at it ahead of time. I don't prepare myself. There's nothing I do for the stream. There's no magic behind the scenes. Everything you see on Saturday is raw. And that's the best way to do it. So if anyone wants to go ahead and lab with me, get your labs fired up tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is Friday. I'll be doing another stream. I'll be showing my topology that it's built, started, and ready to go, ready for Saturday morning. I will be using the iOS V or VIOS images, which my topology uses. As I get further down the road, there's another INE topology or another INE set of labs that's called the full scale labs, which uses 24 devices, 20 routers and 4 switches. I think for that, I might have to convert over to the IOL images because I just don't think my VM can handle, I just don't think I have the resources to handle that large of a topology. So I think I might have to do some manual conversion and convert over to IOL. The only problem is the interfaces are different. So the VIOS uses gigabit Ethernet interfaces, and the IOL image uses just plain Ethernet. But they run so much more efficient and so much more smoothly, and they start up much faster. So it's really, really, really cool. So that's my plan. I got a message here from our guy Jack over Mentors over in the Discord server. What is the book name you keep referencing for TCP/IP? So it's not a TCP/IP volume book. I know there's a couple of those, but Jeff Doyle and a couple other authors as well have TCP/IP ones. This one is CCIE Professional Development, Troubleshooting IP Routing Protocols. I really loved this book. Even the Land Tamer went out and bought a copy per my recommendation. And I tell you what, one of the reasons why I'm not a book guy, I'm not a reader. I don't read for fun. I don't read novels. I don't read chapter books. But I really love tech manuals in a paper form because this is what I take with me when I go on airplanes. Also, my first exposure to this book, this hard soft copy book, was actually in a production environment where I was called in to help troubleshoot actually some OSPF. And I'm not an OSPF expert, but I was called in to troubleshoot to help because they had been burned out on it for a little bit. And I remember I had saw this book on someone's desk. So I went ahead and grabbed this book, opened up to the OSPF chapter, and actually started troubleshooting straight from the book, solved the problem within about 5 minutes. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in every case, okay? So your mileage may vary. But because that happened to me and it was such an eye-opener that, like, wow, if you have a solid methodology for troubleshooting something, you can solve problems really quickly. You can recognize what's wrong. And that sort of showed me that I really need to buckle down on my troubleshooting and get this book. Also, that was in an area where you're not allowed to bring in cell phones, you know, so we couldn't access the internet. We couldn't look on Safari books. We couldn't get this material from a computer. We actually had to have a hard copy. And so that's why also I'm a fan of bringing in books, because you can bring them in and out of areas where you're not allowed to bring in things with wireless communication and stuff like that. So you get to bring in books, and they're very helpful. All right, guys, so I think that just about wraps it up. Short vlog tonight. I hope this was a short vlog. Very cool. There's been a lot of social media interaction going on the past couple of days, especially today. So I was happy to sort of take it back. I didn't do any hard labs today. I used it only for reference to build the blog. So I hope you guys enjoy that for a good sheet of a reference sheet. Please let me know if anything is incorrect or if anything needs extra explanation. And I will circle back around and do Nick Russo's lab again. I'll probably do it on a live stream again, probably a Saturday. We'll do his topology and we'll actually go through and solve the issues. So if anyone wants to go ahead and get that queued up in their environment, I definitely recommend it. It's a really cool lab. And believe me, just because I did the Walking the OSPF Database exercise does not mean I have any advantage over solving any of these OSPF troubleshooting problems. You know, whenever it's time to do that, you know, get ready for a live failure. You know, we always fail live on the air. So that's it. So tomorrow I'm going to get my environment ready for Saturday. I hope everyone's ready to lab along with me. If this is anyone's first time seeing the videos, seeing my vlog, and I've already recommended INE, going over an INE. If you give them the promo code, I think it's new10, it'll give you 10% off if you're a new customer. I think anything or everything but boot camps. Okay, so a really good deal if you even want to buy a video series, I think. You can get 10% off of that. All right, so thanks. See ya.